Hello and welcome to another guide. This time we've got one of the most awaited ultimates in the game. Since the previous rework, she has been dominating the clearing speed, putting her at the top when it comes to anything related to farming. Today I'll be showing you two mobbing builds, one solo boss build, and one gunning hybrid build, which is mostly useful in group bosses. Before touching the mobbing builds, I'll show you two clips comparing both of them. One is a Contagion build and the other one is a Venom synthesis build. Comparing both clips, you will see that Contagion has a bigger spread and more arsenal in its tools to cover bigger areas where mobs spawn far apart, while Venom Synthesis, if the mobs are not stacked, you will sometimes run into problems with MP as you're constantly trying to cover areas with your first skill. When it comes to the damage of both, although Venom Synthesis allows all skills to have their independent dot damage, meaning you can stack more than one dot damage per monster, Contagion's puddles do stack, meaning if 10 enemies die in one spot, per second once they die, the following monsters will receive 10 stacks of Contagion damage. Now, where Venom Synthesis truly shines is at the final stages of the 400% dungeons, where mobs spawn less, so stacking multiple dots will damage the bosses more than Contagion with its first and third skill and Room 0 trauma. So now which one is the best? You decide. Personally, I go for Contagion, as it requires less management of which area to cover, meaning I won't run into MP problems as often. But for dungeons where the spawns are tight, then I'll choose Venom Synthesis, as there won't be a need to cover as many areas with the first skill. Also, the movement speed, although appealing, the 400% dungeons don't have long paths without any enemies spawning. Mostly, each batch of enemies spawns relatively close. Now I will show you both builds. Jumping straight to the mobbing build. Her Contagion module is absolutely insane and core for this build. What it does is when you kill an enemy while they're infected with Room 0 trauma, they leave a puddle of poison. This makes it so a single skill can have a chain reaction on multiple mobs, leaving the whole area covered. Not only that, puddles can stack, making it easy to even kill named enemies. For building Freyna, you will focus primarily on range and raw skill power and skill power modifier. There will be a few modules which reduce your critical hit damage and critical hit chance, but as Freyna has very low base stats for them and the modules are multiplicative and not additive, means that building for crit isn't good at all, so you won't lose anything for having them drop even further. From there, you'll start with the mobbing build. Your build foundation will be increased HP for survivability, focus on tech and focus on toxic for cooldown and damage, skill expansion and maximize range for the size of the puddles, and nimble fingers for lower cooldowns so you can have higher upkeep while running through a dungeon. Keep in mind, skill expansion and maximize range will not show on the tooltip, but they do increase the size of the puddles. From then, you insert Toxic Amplification, which is one of the new modules, and it gives you skill power in exchange for crit damage. You move on to Tech Amplification, which is also another new module. This one gives you skill power modifier on your tech skills in exchange for critical hit rate. This will have its biggest impact on our dot damage. Then, for the last two slots, you add MP conversion for extra cooldown, so you have your unique weapon more frequent, as well as more uptime on your skills as you're running through the dungeon. And finally, HP amplification. Through the 400% dungeons, you will encounter some bosses that will deal a lot of damage. This will aid you to not get one shot and give comfort while clearing it. And now to talk about the build in detail. In this build, apart from the damage modules, you will have range and cooldown. The main reason to not go duration, although tempting, is because range is necessary for clearing large areas with Contagion, and cooldown is a core step to making the kit feel complete, as it reduces the cooldown of her first and third skill for not losing uptime on the spread of her Contagion, as well as the fourth skill, which is the hardest single target damage tool she has. For the second mobbing build, all you do is swap the Descendant module to Venom Synthesis. Moving on, we have the bossing build. With this build, you'll be using Freyna's new module called Venom Injection. What this module does, it changes your second skill defense buff to a skill damage buff. Not only it gives you an extra modifier on your skills, it also has the function of shredding the boss's toxic resistance, making even the most toxic resistant solo bosses doable in a very short time. Also, to add, this module consumes a percentage of your HP per second, and once your HP is at 15%, it will start consuming 6 MP per second, making it so having HP modules won't be necessary, as you will be dealing with the bosses without much of a scratch. I recommend having the mobbing build done first, as it will share many of the same socket types. On this build, instead of going range and increase HP in the mobbing build, with the difference between the builds being Toxic Specialist, Tech Specialist, Overwhelming Shield, Venom Syncitium, which adds 10.2% extra toxic skill power, Dangerous Ambush, which will give you 49.8% skill power once the boss is knocked down, helping you finish them quicker, a Strong Mentality just for comfort, and lastly but not least, Spear and Shield. Overwhelming Shield has a weird interaction with Venom Injection here. Forcing your max HP to 1 gives you the max amount of skill power modifier. Spear and Shield in this case does not need to be leveled, as the skill power stat coming from it doesn't increase with its levels. Now to talk about the build in detail. The main focus of this build is to kill solo bosses as fast as possible with the single use of your 4th skill. Although it is a solo boss, please keep in mind Swamp Walker is an anomaly. For killing him, you can follow the 3rd build, although I recommend not using Freyna at all if you want to speed farm him. Now for the 3rd and last build. This is a hybrid gunning build, dealing both skill damage and firearm damage. Once again, I recommend doing the mobbing build first, as there will be a lot of sockets shared between them. This build, to be efficient, will be very expensive. For her Transcendant module, we're going to use the new one called Toxic Mixture. It makes it so instead of you giving the enemy room 0 trauma, you will now give a new debuff called Necrosis. Necrosis can be stacked to 100, and each stack giving you an extra 0.9% firearm attack, reaching 90%, while also giving you 10% additional critical hit rate to your weapon, and reducing the enemy's firearm critical hit resistance by 15% at max stacks. As a disclaimer, there's a weird interaction where her 3rd skill only gives 1 stack of Necrosis, although it does damage over time. Because of this, building for range and having your Putrid Venom cover most of the area to maintain the stacks on the boss doesn't work. The only efficient way to build stacks is with her 4th skill, and maintaining it with her 1st skill. Because of this, you will be building into cooldown and a little bit of duration. To maintain the stacks, it is best to shoot your 1st skill directly at the boss instead of the ground beneath him, as the AoE will be very small, but the direct hit will guarantee the stack. Moving on, from the mobby build, you will remove both maximize range and skill expansion, and place short focus and HP amplification. I chose to go for HP amplification for the sole reason that the bosses which gunning is usually recommended are the ones that hit the hardest, like Gluttony or Deathstalker, so the more survivability the better. Another option you have in this build, depending on how comfortable you are with it, you can replace Nimble Fingers for maximized conservation in case you feel as if you're depleting MP too fast, but for me, this just isn't the case. Now I will talk about the build in detail. There are multiple reasons to why I chose to go for a hybrid build. First, the setup for getting the stacks without building hybrid is a big downtime in damage. Also, her unique weapon is one of her best skills, surpassing most of the time the damage of a firearm. In general, you will enrage bosses very quickly, meaning 2 to 3 times a fight, you'll have to set up the stacks for her firearm. These were the 3 builds I wanted to showcase today. Next, I'll talk about which weapons to go for, what reactor stats you're looking for, and what component set is the best. Starting off with the weapons. For mobbing, I recommend Secret Garden. It's passive, it has a 50% chance of proccing when its unique ability is leveled up, giving you 16% skill power per stack, and works perfectly for when you're rushing through mobs and spamming skills through dungeons. For the build, although Sharp Precision Shot will help you kill Colossi faster, in a dungeon, all things die, including named bosses, before you have a significant amount of Sharp Precision Shot stacks to offset the fire rate penalty. Also, magazine size modules transfer to your Freyna's unique gun, which means they are essential for any gun made for Freyna. In this case, I haven't had the necessity of having 2 mag sizes for dungeons, but if you want to go for extra ammo, you can replace half aiming for a compulsive magazine. Now moving for the solo boss and group boss builds. You're going to want to go with a second gun that has Sharp Precision Shot and both max size modules in. Any gun will work for it. Then, as you're done using Freyna's unique weapon, in the case of the group boss build, you swap to Enduring Legacy. Another option will be Greg's Reverse Fate, but you will face 2 issues. First, if the boss isn't down or being grappled, Greg's reverse unique ability will fill up the boss's enrage bar super fast, making you go through unnecessary enrage phases. Also, the reason for not using Secret Garden is that the AoEs for these builds are too small and you will counter the same issue as Jaber, where bosses constantly run out of your AoE. For the component set, Slayer set will be the most efficient when it comes to damage. If you still feel like you're too squishy, you can switch to 2-piece Venom set and any other component that has max HP. Now for the reactor. I unfortunately haven't farmed the perfect reactor, and mainly for the fact that I and many were expecting you to be able to change the weapon mounting in the reactor dispatch, but I will still leave you with what you're looking for. For the Mobby reactor, you'll want duration and cooldown for the stats, and for the Colossi reactor, you'll want skill power against Colossi and cooldown. And that's it for the video. If you do like this type of content, don't forget to share your feedback, as it is always appreciated. You can also leave a like or a comment, and if you want to show further support, you can always subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.